The narrative opens in a spacious chamber where a mother, deep in the throes of labor, is in the process of bringing a newborn baby girl into the world. The unexpected arrival of this princess leaves the household attendants in stunned silence, their whispers full of disbelief as they wonder how such an event could possibly occur. Even the mother herself appears taken aback, exclaiming that a daughter's birth within the Bosun royal family is wholly unforeseen. After all, tradition dictates that only boys should be born. In the midst of this commotion, the father strides into the room and, with unmistakable disdain, declares that a worthless being has been produced. At that very moment, a maid steps forward to remind him that the infant bears the mark of Narvel, a portent which, according to lore, seals the fate of all such children to die at the age of 21. With that damning information, the father turns away, leaving as if his disinterest were complete, a living embodiment of indifference. Overcome by sorrow, the mother weeps and apologizes to her child for having brought her into a world so cruel. In response, the tiny infant reaches out a delicate hand toward her, a gesture that the maid interprets as a desire to remain close to the Empress. Deeply moved, the Empress enfolds her child in an embrace, tears flowing as she silently apologizes in her inner thoughts. The baby, with a quiet promise, assures her mother that once she masters speech, she will explain that everything will be all right. Even though she might never acquire the mastery of swordsmanship, her intellect remains remarkably sharp. In a stunning display of foreknowledge, she recalls minute details about future leading figures, a prediction of budding wizards, forthcoming magical engineers, and even the names of influential business magnates. This vast reservoir of knowledge originates from a novel she once read in a previous life, a fact that reveals her present circumstances to be yet another incarnation. In that very story, the Bosun family, a royal lineage, upheld an odd tradition that prized pure strength above all else, valuing a person solely for their might. For over 5 centuries, this ruthless dynasty had sired only sons, with the art of swordsmanship meticulously adapted to the magical prowess of men, thereby precluding any possibility for a woman to learn. Hence, to be born a girl in a family where physical strength is the ultimate currency is nothing short of a curse. Unbeknownst to many, the princess born under these dire circumstances is none other than our central protagonist. Every time her mother is near, the young princess is met with endless apologies and tearful expressions of regret. When she first opened her eyes in this new existence, she was momentarily confused, questioning whether the world she now saw was nothing more than an elaborate dream. It did not take long, however, for her to realize that she had been reincarnated into the exact realm described in that long familiar novel, one she had read no fewer than 17 times. Now known as Alexia, she bears the burden of a terminal illness from the moment of her birth, the consequence of having inherited the Narvel mark as chronicled in the story. The narrative ominously foretells that her life will be cut short at the age of 21, the moment when every grain of sand in her metaphorical hourglass runs out. Until that fated day arrives, however, she is free to lead a healthy and joyful existence, even if it amounts to only 21 years. In a tender moment, she clutches her mother, who inquires in soft tones whether the baby understands her comforting words. Alexia responds in a babbling, endearing manner reminiscent of her earlier life, when, as an orphan battling cancer since the age of 4, she had been depicted by the media as a pitiable soul. Despite the donations that helped her survive in the hospital and the accolades bestowed upon her for her brilliant academic mind, she was never truly happy, burdened as she was with the knowledge of her own impending death. Now, as the Empress asks a nearby maid if the child comprehends her, the maid confirms with quiet confidence. Regarded as a genius by those around her, Alexia laughs and smiles at the compliments, while her mother reassures her that even if she does not prove to be extraordinarily gifted, her health and well-being are what truly matter. With a warm embrace, the Empress declares that this life is a priceless gift. For generations, the Bosun royal family has observed an ancient custom known as the selection ceremony. Much like a traditional Korean ritual, akin to a refined stone-catching game, this ceremony operates on a level far removed from ordinary competitions, especially given that the Bosun lineage is celebrated for its extraordinarily rapid growth. According to the maid's instructions, the princess simply must choose the sword that most calls to her heart, an act that will soon reveal her genius to all during the ceremony. As the maid opens the enormous doors to the grand hall, Alexia is instantly dazzled by the spectacle that unfolds before her eyes. In her mind, she marvels at the sheer splendor of the Bosen royal family's Hall of Swords, scrutinizing the imposing figures arrayed in front of her alongside her father and mother, and wondering if her destined place among the stars has already been preordained. Although she has seen her father before, this is her first encounter with her brothers face to face, a realization that fills her with wonder, for she now sees that the characters from the novel have taken on flesh and blood, and that these are the faces she will behold for the next 21 years. Among the displayed arms, the dark central sword known as the Sea Wave, accompanied by 10 other assorted blades, has been chosen by the princes of Bozen for countless generations. It is said to serve as a proof of their royal lineage or a similar testament to their strength. In her mind, she reassures herself that everything is in order, even as she confronts the chilling fact that if she selects the Sea Wave, a lethal assassin will be dispatched by the Sword Council, a formidable institution charged with preserving the founding principles of Bosun. This council is notorious for its hardline stance against a princess who, being unable to master swordsmanship, would be unworthy of wielding such a legendary blade. Recalling the events detailed in the novel, Alexia remembers that the heroine miraculously survives such an attempt on her life, yet she is not the one the original tale held dear. Moreover, that survival was attributed solely to luck, and if fortune were ever to desert her, death would come swiftly. Resolutely, in her inner voice, she declares that she cannot allow herself to perish in such a manner, to die after merely glimpsing those beautiful faces and imagining the sumptuous macarons, tarts, cakes, and other delicacies she was deprived of in her previous ailing existence would be utterly unjust. With newfound resolve, Alexia cheers herself on, determined to seize every moment of the 21 years that lie ahead. She understands that by introducing new variables, she might alter the course of events. Finally, the moment arrives for her to choose her sword. Aware that the Sea Wave would inevitably summon an assassin, while any alternative blade might disqualify her from princesshood, she deduces that there is but one course of action. She must activate the ice sky cliché by choosing the Emperor's sword. In the realm of the ice sky, it is customary to select the cold and aloof father, and that reasoning is hardly unfounded, for he is widely recognized as the Empire's foremost sword. As the moment of decision arrives, Alexia begins to crawl forward, her thoughts darkened by the fear of an impending assassin. Despite possessing all the memories of her previous life, her body remains that of a small child, and her emotions are inevitably intertwined with her physical vulnerability. Steadying herself, she resolves to banish her fears by singing softly, a melody that, in its simplicity, diminishes the terror she feels. At that moment, the Emperor notices the child's odd behavior and inquires about her actions. The servant Kane suggests that perhaps the princess is instinctively committing magical chants to memory. Skeptical, the Emperor questions whether a 1-year-old can indeed memorize such incantations, to which Kane calmly explains that while it is rare, there is a documented phenomenon called innate chanting, a fact recognized by the Magic Federation. Intrigued yet unconvinced about how the Empire's princess might achieve such a feat, the Emperor listens further. Meanwhile, Alexia ascends a flight of grand stairs, marveling at their towering height built for adults, and finds solace in the fact that no assassin has appeared, presumably because she avoided choosing the Sea Wave. Upon reaching the top, she calls out for her parents, her excitement palpable as she clings to the comforting warmth and familiar scent of her father's leg. In that tender moment, her older brother greets her with an admiring comment on her cuteness, and she beams back in return. The third son chimes in with a playful remark, asking if he isn't cuter, to which the second son concedes that while he cannot compete in the realm of adorableness, Alexia outshines them both. Her innocent laughter fills the space, though she momentarily wonders if her brother's antics are somewhat dazzling. Observing the silent members of the gathering, those who missed the assassin's precise timing, she reflects that once the selection ceremony concludes, none of them will be permitted a single word, for they will have completed their grim duty. Firm in her determination, she resolves that she is not meant for the Sea Wave, but for the Imperial Sword, a choice that symbolizes her deliberate selection of her father. In a moment reminiscent of the climactic scenes of a romance novel, she speaks a single word and reaches out to touch her father's sword, signifying, with resolute intent, that she has chosen his symbol of power. Acting as her advocate, Kane then informs the Emperor that the princess has indeed made her selection, and when Alexia nods in affirmation, Cain is duly impressed by her capacity to communicate. Observing the unfolding events, Cain inquires why she would choose His Majesty, to which Alexia simply answers with a heartfelt, Mama, Papa. This response causes Cain to chuckle as he turns to the Emperor, affirming that the princess's choice was indeed motivated by the fact that he is regarded as the Empire's mightiest sword. The Emperor, still skeptical, questions whether Cain truly believes a child of only 1 year can converse, but Cain counters that innate intelligence is a rare but documented phenomenon, even in the very young. Insisting on further evidence, the Emperor is soon provided with additional proof as Cain converses with Alexia to verify her understanding. Although the Emperor remains slightly unconvinced, citing his own lack of early verbal ability as a counter-argument, Alexia laughs, firmly convinced that her father was a prodigy from birth, achieving everything he set out to do through pride and obstinacy. Suddenly, Cain playfully asks if she would like to try winking like him. To the delight of those present, Alexia winks one eye and at Cain's gentle urging follows by winking the other. Her mother and older brother burst into laughter at this adorable display, and Cain later reports to the Emperor that the princess winked twice, questioning if this should be accepted as evidence of her communicative ability. Noticing her father's stern glare, Alexia is startled as he shifts, causing her to lose balance for a brief moment before he catches her in a manner so comical that everyone watches in bemused silence. Embarrassed, she covers her eyes, only to be asked by her father for her name. With a shy voice, she replies, Alexia. And he, repeating her name with a slight correction, confirms that she has indeed chosen him as her emblem, a decision that Cain later clarifies by declaring that the princess has selected the sword. Following this, the Emperor officially records the event, announcing that the princess has chosen a sword, and the ceremony concludes safely that day amid resounding applause. In the wake of the selection ceremony, as the festive mood begins to subside, Alexia suddenly feels a wave of dizziness, the very kind that once heralded unconsciousness in her former life. She wonders if this sensation is some form of retribution for having altered the storyline of the novel, a feeling she loathes because it mirrors the agony of her previous existence. Recalling how, in her past life, she had been born frail and ill, perhaps as a consequence of wartime tragedies. She prays fervently for forgiveness, promising that if she survives the allotted 21 years, she will care for everyone without demanding anything in return. In a moment of warmth and tenderness, she opens her eyes to find herself cradled in her father's arms. Cain attempts to comfort her by noting that now that the ceremony is over, she can sleep as long as she wishes. Yet, upon hearing these soothing words, little Alexia begins to cry. She is acutely aware that in the Bosan royal family, where ruthlessness leaves no room for tears, even a baby's sorrow may be deemed a sign of weakness and result in being cast aside. Determined not to succumb to such vulnerability, she summons all her strength and, seizing control of the situation, allows herself to be gently held by Cain. Amid playful banter, Cain jesting about his own comfort and the Emperor retorting with remarks about his lack of muscle, the baby princess is escorted to her private chamber. There, Alexia feels an inexplicable adoration for Lord Cain, finding it amusing that a man with a past as an assassin and a spectral swordsman could also be so kind and meticulous. With a tender touch, Cain lays the baby in her cradle, and she falls into a seamless, peaceful sleep, a sight so endearing that it draws quiet admiration from all who behold it. Several months later, an update on the life of our young protagonist reveals that her days now follow a simple yet steady routine. She sleeps when tired, awakens to eat, and grows incrementally after each meal. During this time, her vocabulary expands at an astonishing rate, captivating the affectionate eyes of both her mother and the nurse. The nurse, impressed by the child's capacity to memorize magical chants, a feat almost unheard of even within the prestigious Modal Magic Federation, regards her as nothing short of a genius. Little AEL, as she is sometimes called, delights in the attention she receives, so much so that she even begins to perform push-ups, a remarkable accomplishment at her tender age, considering that many adults struggle with even a single push-up. Reflecting on the Bosan physique, one might recall that the princes of Bosan were reputed to be capable of splitting rocks with a sword by the age of 10, making her impressive feats less surprising in context. Out of the blue, the Emperor re-enters the room, a sight not seen since the selection ceremony, and the Empress gently reminds him to knock before entering, a courtesy he momentarily forgets. Obediently, the emperor steps out, knocks on the door, and re-enters with a shy demeanor that the empress finds particularly endearing. It is well known that Alexia's father has rarely shown overt love for his children, yet the empress's affection for him runs deep. Despite his renowned prowess in swordsmanship, he remains at the mercy of her gentle influence. The original novel recounts that when Alexia was born, the emperor had coldly dismissed her as useless simply because she was a girl, a comment that compelled him to spend an entire day consoling the grieving mother. Though Alexia is painfully aware that, within the imperial family, being born female is almost synonymous with a curse, and that bearing the Narval mark only adds to her plight, the cruelty of that remark still wounds her deeply, yet she manages to let go of her sorrow, comforted by the realization that the Empire does care for the Empress, as evidenced by his unexpected visit, which reveals that he misses her. Alexia recognizes that her father is the strongest figure in the world, rivaling even the most formidable male protagonists, with his only vulnerability lying in his love for her mother. The novel further tells that after her mother's demise, the emperor fell into a deep depression, eventually leading to his defeat by the male protagonist and the subsequent downfall of the empire. As Alexia watches her father struggle under the weight of his own emotions, her brother Ezra inquires of the empress about her actions, and she explains that Alexia is calling for him. In that charged moment, as their eyes meet, Alexia senses an almost magnetic pull in her father's gaze. She recalls that, in the original story, she was said to have inherited her father's golden eyes, a detail that makes her wonder if her own eyes shine in the same brilliant hue. Impulsively, almost without thought, she utters the words, "I love you," to him. Both father and daughter are startled by this spontaneous expression. Even the emperor himself is taken aback and asks her to repeat it. With her heart pounding and a mixture of embarrassment and fear, Alexia hesitates, wondering if she has spoken out of turn. Her anxiety mounts as she wonders if she has done something wrong. But before the tension can mount further, her mother steps in to comfort her. The empress gently explains that the emperor is not angry but merely reserved, encouraging Alexia to ask for a hug from her father. Although initially overwhelmed by the prospect of such intimacy, the little princess finds the courage to speak in her softest baby voice, asking, "Daddy, can I have a hug?" The emperor's reaction is awkward and unpracticed, his usual reserved nature at odds with the spontaneous affection. But under the empress's gentle tutelage, he slowly learns the proper way to hold his daughter. Amid teasing remarks about Alexia's weight and comparisons to her older sibling Sermon, the empress assures everyone that Alexia's robust growth signals the promise of future strength. In that moment, cradled in her father's arms, a stark contrast to the abandonment of her previous life, Alexia experiences the warm, enveloping protection of familial love. So moved is the emperor by this innocent display that he tightens his embrace, his hardened exterior softening just enough for everyone to witness a glimpse of the man he truly is. The empress, observing the tender exchange, softly remarks that the strongest heart is the one that cherishes what is most precious, and it is precisely that gentle spirit which she loves above all. These loving words cause the emperor's heart to race, and though he struggles to maintain his customary cool detachment, Alexia senses the vulnerability beneath. With the secure warmth of her father's arms surrounding her, she drifts into sleep, leaving behind a scene of quiet, heartfelt intimacy as night slowly descends. Later that evening, as Ezra lies awake, his thoughts become tangled in worries about Alexia. He wonders if her challenges arise from her not being born of pure Bosan blood, or perhaps because she bears a striking resemblance to Serna. More urgently, he frets that she might falter in mastering the critical art of Bosan swordsmanship, a skill so essential that, in their society, a person's worth is measured solely by their strength. Ezra is tormented by the thought that if she fails to rise in the succession competition, she might not be able to stand against external threats. Compounding these fears is the grim foreknowledge of her destined death at the age of 21, a fate that seems inescapable. Yet, even as these uncertainties swirl in his mind, Ezra reminds himself that destiny cannot be altered by dwelling on such dark thoughts. Seeking to distract himself from the heaviness of fate, he rouses Cain and proposes a friendly duel, a customary practice between old comrades to lighten the mood. Time passes swiftly, and even though her previous life was short, Alexia's past is rich with experience. she resolves to make the most of every precious moment left in the 21 years granted to her, convinced that her rapid growth may indeed be a product of her bosun heritage. Although her physical frame now resembles that of a 5-year-old, her ability to communicate with adults has improved markedly. One day, the maid announces that the Empress has come to see her. With excitement, Alexia confirms that she can now walk and even run with only occasional stumbles, thanks to her robust constitution that rarely leaves her injured. During a quiet afternoon tea with the Empress, an important new development is discussed. Lord Kane will henceforth serve as her primary teacher, marking the beginning of her formal lessons. Her mother advises her to remain steadfast in her morals and approach her studies with unwavering dedication. Curiosity piqued, the little princess inquires why Kane, rather than the esteemed Moab, has been chosen to guide her. The Empress explains that Moab is no longer employed by the royal household, a fact that leaves Alexia puzzled since, according to the original narrative, Moab was a venerable educator from a prestigious bosun teaching family who had instructed the princes for generations. Seeking clarity, Alexia turns directly to Lord Kane with her questions. This arrangement pleases her immensely, as she has always cherished the time spent with Kane, not only because he is a master swordsman from a magical lineage, but also because he possesses the ability to wield magic, including the wondrous flying spells that have always delighted her. When Kane arrives at the palace, he greets both the Empress and Alexia with warmth. Overjoyed by his presence, the little princess leaps from her seat and rushes toward him in a joyful reunion. With the Empress soon departing to attend to other matters, Kane is entrusted with caring for Alexia, who immediately seizes the opportunity to ask him why he has been appointed her teacher. In her innocent confusion, she remarks that she had always assumed her teacher would be Moab, the renowned educator from a long line of bosun instructors. Kane, with playful mock indignation, teases her by suggesting that perhaps she cares only for Moab and not for him, even feigning hurt with a few theatrical tears. Yet Alexia sees through his act, a fact that impresses him and prompts him to praise her as amazing and skilled. Not fully understanding these words, she accuses him of deliberately using difficult language and warns that if he does it again, he will turn into a bad beetle. Amused by her candidness, Kane promises that he will refrain from such wordplay in the future. After their lesson concludes, Kane seeks an audience with the Emperor to discuss the astonishing events of the day. He explains that Alexia has demonstrated a surprisingly mature understanding of the concept of death and remarkably remains composed despite being barely 3 years old. The Emperor, visibly taken aback, struggles to comprehend how such awareness could exist in a child. Kane further reveals that the princess remembers every word spoken since her birth, a fact that compels him to ask if the Emperor truly once called her useless when she was born. With some reluctance, the Emperor admits that he did utter those harsh words, a confession that surprises Kane. He presses the Emperor for an explanation, questioning why such a remark was made given Alexia's current acceptance of her fate. Overcome with guilt, the Emperor confesses that he made the comment because he had believed that a girl could never learn the family's sacred swordsmanship techniques. Kane, however, challenges that notion passionately, arguing that Alexia's worth far exceeds the mastery of any single art. Not wishing to linger on this painful subject, the Emperor abruptly changes the topic, inviting Kane to join him in a sparring match. Although Kane is reluctant, mindful that his primary duty is to teach rather than to duel, the Emperor insists, and soon a brief yet swift exchange ensues. As Kane effortlessly evades the Emperor's rapid attack, a skill honed during his days as an assassin, a quiet chuckle escapes him, hinting that beneath the Emperor's steely demeanor lies a deep well of regret. In the days that follow, Kane visits Alexia daily to impart his knowledge. Although the princess is initially disappointed at the thought that she will never master the art of the sword, she soon discovers a wealth of other subjects to explore. One day, brimming with excitement, she presents Kane with a drawing she made of the Emperor. Ever the gentleman, Kane takes great care to ensure that she feels valued, praising her artwork as so impeccable that it seems as though the spirit of Michelangelo, the greatest artist of the century, dwells within her. Taking his compliment literally, Alexia asks whether there really is a spirit inside her. Laughing gently, Kane reassures her that he was merely joking, and explains that, should any such extraordinary event occur, the Holy Knights would promptly intervene to suppress it. Intrigued, the little princess then inquires if Michelangelo was a bad person. Kane clarifies that the presence of a spirit does not necessarily denote evil. Rather, if a spirit were to possess someone, it would likely be a demonic force, a phenomenon known as possession. The very idea unsettles Alexia, yet Kane goes on to emphasize that there is no cause for alarm because the Holy Knights are ever vigilant. He even suggests that, in time, he might introduce her to some of his acquaintances among them. To his mild surprise, Alexia declines the offer, expressing her belief that it is best not to provoke the knight's ire. Kane is duly impressed by her sharp thinking, remarking silently at how advanced her reasoning is for someone merely 3 years old. Later, after the teaching session, Kane retires to the Emperor's office and presents him with a portrait of the Emperor, drawn by Alexia. The Emperor, in his characteristically brusque manner, dismisses the drawing as trash, a comment that annoys Kane greatly. The Emperor goes on to suggest that it resembles a bland work by an incompetent artist, implying that even Kane's own attempts at art would fall short. In response, Kane clarifies that the drawing is not his work at all, but rather the work of a 3-year-old child. He then carefully points out the unique details in the portrait: the softness of the lips, the finely chiseled nose, and, most notably, the striking clarity of the eyes. Despite Kane's earnest observations, the Emperor remains uninterested and orders him to conclude the discussion. However, when Kane reveals that the artist is none other than his own daughter, the Emperor's attitude shifts noticeably. Kane highlights that, although the princess and her father have not shared much time together, she has managed to capture intricate details that testify to her keen observational skills and deep affection for him. This revelation softens the Emperor's harsh stance, and he then teasingly asks Kane if perhaps he is jealous of the love the princess shows him. Unashamedly, Kane admits that he does feel a measure of jealousy, recalling how he had once even threatened the head chef to ensure that the princess's favorite jelly was prepared just right, though he had yet to hear her say, "I love you." The Emperor, overcome by a fit of jealousy himself, slams the table and demands that Kane get straight to the point. Realizing the seriousness of the moment, Kane drops his playful act and plainly states that the princess possesses exceptional talent not only in magic, but also in the field of engineering. This revelation leaves the Emperor utterly flabbergasted. Seizing the opportunity, Kane suggests that the princess would benefit immensely from the guidance of a dedicated mage, a magic teacher who could provide her with a professional education in the arcane arts. Although the Emperor appears confused by the idea, he eventually grants his approval, and Alexia is officially assigned a magic teacher. 3 months later, Alexia meets her new magic instructor, a formidable mage named Edris. From the moment she lays eyes on Edris, a mixture of familiarity and dread washes over her. There is something in Edris's presence, a subtle, almost eerie aura, reminiscent of the quiet intensity of Wednesday's character, that immediately unsettles the young princess. For reasons she cannot fully articulate, Alexia recognizes Edris at once, and her heart flutters with nervous apprehension. In the original narrative, Edris was depicted as a ruthless, ambitious villain, a first-class mage from the Myral Magic Federation whose reputation was built on cunning intelligence and an unyielding desire for power. In that version of the story, Edris had betrayed her own mentor and seized his position as the master of mages, all in pursuit of establishing a vast empire that would rule the continent. During her rise, she had clashed with the male protagonist, Aaron, who eventually ascended to the throne as emperor. Alexia recalls that no matter how potent Edris's dark magic proved to be, Aaron had thwarted her efforts time and again, and it was ultimately through his interventions that the Narvel curse was cast upon the heroine. Yet even these memories are now blurred, for in her previous life, the heroine's demise had shocked everyone, only to later be complicated by the startling revelation that the heroine was, in fact, a dragon, a twist that no reader had ever anticipated. In this world, dragons are revered as the true masters of magic, regarded as the originators of all magical knowledge, and uniquely capable of nullifying the dreaded Narval mark. After that dramatic incident, the heroine had sealed away her memories, though she remained keenly aware of her true identity as a dragon. In summary, the male protagonist, now renowned as the epitome of strength, sits confidently at the forefront of the empire, a faint smile playing on his lips. The little princess is fully aware that her life is an intricately woven tapestry, a story so complex that even the strongest female figures might struggle to unravel it. Moreover, with another 18 years yet to unfold, Alexia finds herself baffled by the premature appearance of a villainess, a character who has emerged even before the introduction of the original narrative's key elements. As these thoughts churn in her mind, her skin grows pale, catching the attention of Edris. Sensing her distress, Edris inquires in a cool tone whether the princess is all right. Alexia insists that she is fine, even though she internally knows that her childlike body is incapable of quelling her inner turmoil as she wishes. Her thoughts race wildly as she contemplates the unfolding situation. She recalls from the novel that Edris possesses a rare talent for reading people's psyches and exploiting their deepest weaknesses, a gift that allowed her to identify that the heroine was not like ordinary humans and to restrain her accordingly. Now, faced with challenges that seem to have arrived far too early, the little princess is overwhelmed by anxiety. She trembles at the thought that if Edris discovers her secret, the consequences could be irrevocable. Determined to avoid drawing any undue attention to herself as a special child, she resolves that maintaining a calm, logical exterior is the only way to remain inconspicuous. To that end, she decides to embrace her naturally childish mannerisms. In a burst of defiant emotion, she throws a tantrum, crying out that she wants Cain to remain her teacher and not Edris. Taken aback by this outburst, Edris's gaze suddenly hardens, sending a chill down Alexia's spine. In that tense moment, the princess recalls that in the original tale, it was Aaron, the male protagonist, who had finally subdued Edris, though his own awakening had been spurred on by unspeakable torture. Edris's unexpected assignment as her teacher is a significant deviation from the story Alexia once knew, and the thought of the repercussions fills her with anxiety. She wonders whether Aaron will eventually awaken if she does nothing, and fears that if he does not, the burden of stopping the villain might ultimately fall upon someone within the Bosun family. This possibility is deeply unsettling, for it suggests that the narrative is shifting in a dramatic and potentially dangerous way. Confronted with these troubling prospects, the young princess decides that for the time being, it might be best to let events proceed as they will, even as she internally vows to protect her family at all costs. Embracing the reality that she has been granted an extra 21 years, a brief yet precious gift, Alexia resolves to leave something positive behind in this world. With determination, she decides that protecting her family and ensuring her mother's safety, along with keeping her father strong enough to overcome any future adversary, must be her highest priority. At the same time, she surmises that winning over Edris might ultimately prove to be a strategic advantage. With this in mind, the young princess begins to plan how she might gradually soften the villainous mage's harsh demeanor through consistent acts of kindness. The very next day, as Edris enters her room for their scheduled lesson, Alexia carefully closes the door to ensure privacy. Then, with a mixture of hope and resolve, she surprises Edris with a small offering, a peach-flavored jelly designed to disarm and endear. Unbeknownst to Edris, this gentle act is the first step in Alexia's secret strategy to build trust and eventually win her over. Over the course of the following days, the princess meticulously implements her plan by repeatedly engaging Edris with questions about her age, her past, and her personal tastes. She hopes to gather the crucial information that will enable her to influence the mage in the future. Initially, Edris is taken aback by the intensity of the little girl's interrogation, but she soon begins to answer, revealing that she is 22 years old and was named after a flower that once blossomed in her village. Edris explains that she began studying magic at around the age of 7, and although she professes little interest in food, especially greasy fare, she nevertheless maintains a disciplined regimen. A few days earlier, Edris had even broached the subject of the Narvel curse with Alexia, fully aware that the princess understood its ominous implications. As the conversation unfolds, Alexia ponders whether Edris's interest in the curse is driven by personal research or something more self-serving. Though uneasy, she listens intently, all the while aware that Edris's intentions may not be entirely altruistic. Thus, as the days pass and Alexia's journey through this complex life continues, she grows both in stature and in wisdom. Her interactions with Edris become increasingly frequent, and the princess adopts a subtle form of defiance by insisting, through a dramatic, childish outburst, that Cain be returned as her teacher instead of Edris. This exaggerated display is meant to mask her true inner nature, a strategy that she hopes will keep her secret safe from Edris's probing perception. Yet instead of being disturbed by this behavior, Edris's expression turns cold and unyielding, sending shivers down Alexia's spine. In that charged moment, the young princess is forced to confront the gravity of her situation, remembering all too well that in the original tale it was Aaron who finally subdued Edris, an awakening that came only after enduring great torture. The fact that Edris has now been assigned as her teacher is a significant departure from the story she once knew, and the implications of this change fill her with unease. She worries that if Aaron does not awaken, or if he does awaken only to leave the burden of confrontation on the Bosun family's shoulders, then her loved ones may be forced into a deadly conflict with the villainess. This possibility makes her heart race with apprehension, yet she also resolves that, for the time being, it is best to let events unfold naturally, while she quietly prepares to protect those she holds dear. In the days that follow, Alexia embraces her remaining 21 years with a renewed determination to make a positive impact, no matter how brief the time may be. She resolves to use every moment to safeguard her family, and she dares to believe that winning over Edris through genuine kindness might eventually tilt the scales in her favor. With each tender act, such as offering peach-flavored jelly or engaging in heartfelt conversation, she hopes to chip away at the mage's cold exterior. Though Edris's responses remain guarded at first, the little princess persists, confident that her natural charm and sincerity will eventually build a foundation of trust. Her strategy is methodical and patient, for she knows that altering the course of fate requires time, effort, and above all, a steadfast commitment to love. And so, as the teaching sessions continue and the shifting dynamics within the palace become ever more intricate, the young princess navigates her extraordinary life with a blend of innocent wonder, precocious intelligence, and careful strategy. With each passing day, she grows, not only in physical stature, but also in emotional wisdom, resolutely determined to use her unique talents in magic, art, and engineering to defy the grim predictions of her past. In the background, the watchful eyes of family members, mentors, and even potential adversaries observe her progress with a mixture of skepticism and hope. Though her future remains shrouded in uncertainty, one thing is certain. Alexia is resolved to make every moment count, to challenge the cruel dictates of Bosun tradition, and ultimately to leave behind a legacy defined by compassion, resilience, and quiet defiance in the face of fate. "What sort of curse do I have?" Alexia began, explaining that the malediction afflicting her was the very one destined to claim her life when she reached adulthood. In response, Edris inquired of the young princess whether she truly understood the nature of death. Alexia admitted that she was well aware of death's inevitability, and precisely because of that awareness, she was determined to create cherished memories with those she loved, so that when her time finally came, regret would be kept at bay. Shocked, Edris pressed on, asking if contemplating death filled her with dread or sorrow. Alexia acknowledged that indeed it did bring sadness. Yet she maintained that her life itself was a precious gift. In fact, she confided that meeting Edris was also a gift for her, and she silently admitted that, had their encounter occurred 20 years later, it might have been far more terrifying. For that reason, she felt immense relief and gratitude that fate had allowed them to meet now. Almost immediately, Edris's prolonged silence captured Alexia's attention. Glancing toward the mage, she discovered her in tears, an image that left her utterly baffled. Wanting to understand the cause of this unexpected display of emotion, Alexia asked the teacher what had moved her to tears. Yet Edris only turned her head away, murmuring that it was nothing and that there was no need for concern. Still, Alexia found the situation peculiar, remembering that according to the novel's account, such an occurrence was out of character. In the story, Edris was celebrated for her skill in disguise and performance, and these tears appeared to be yet another act. Concluding that Edris must be merely putting on a show, Alexia mused that, had she not been familiar with the narrative, she might have found herself in serious trouble. Nevertheless, the mage eventually broke her silence with a voice laden with sorrow as she implored the princess not to remain calm about death, promising instead to shoulder that heavy, frightening burden together with her. This almost villainous declaration touched Alexia's heart, and she quickly bounded toward Edris to embrace her. At least, that was the outward impression. Inside, Alexia was painfully aware that the woman before her was, in essence, a psychopath whose words should not truly have ensnared her. In a moment of awkward embarrassment, she merely returned the hug, grateful that her genuine emotions remained hidden from Edris's scrutiny. Fortune, it seemed, had ensured that her true feelings stayed cloaked from the princess. In the novel's version of events, Edris eventually exacted her revenge on Wilhelm and ascended to the highest echelon of the Myral Federation as the Master of Mages. Yet her journey was far from smooth. Many of Wilhelm's loyal followers among the mages persisted in their opposition, and being branded a traitor for slaying her own teacher served only to undermine her authority. At that time, Edris had but one recourse. She had to externalize the inner turmoil festering within her. By channeling her overwhelming magical abilities, she gradually expanded her power base, winning the recognition of both the mages and the members of the Magic Federation. Ironically, the only moments that brought her genuine joy were those filled with warfare and conquest, which ultimately became the sole purpose of her existence. This, then, is the story of the nefarious Edris, a narrative which RMC now understands must never be taken at face value simply because of Edris's warm and inviting exterior. Soon afterward, the scene shifted to show Edris in the role of teacher, instructing Alexia in the ways of magic. After concluding her lecture, Edris closed the book and announced that, from that moment forward, they would approach magic with the utmost seriousness. She reminded the young princess that, though she was still very young, her environmental circumstances differed greatly from those of children in the Merodio Federation. Reassuring her, Edris explained that although magic might initially seem strange and even intimidating, it was far less daunting than it appeared. Over the course of the following 6 months, Alexia made remarkable strides. Edris was seen guiding her step by step, teaching her how to harness her mana and concentrate her magical energy upon a stone placed before her. During those 6 months, Alexia even pondered why she, unlike any other princess in her empire, was learning magic. Considering the circumstances, it was clear that she had progressed significantly. With unwavering focus, she directed her mana onto the stone, causing the magical circle around it to begin glowing. What happened next astonished even Edris. Alexia succeeded in forming a barrier around the stone, and not just any barrier, but one that was surprisingly robust. Although Alexia had only mastered the basics of magic, accomplishing such a feat in just half a year was nothing short of extraordinary. What made the moment even more remarkable was the barrier's display of 5 shimmering colors, a phenomenon Edris had only ever read about in theory. Witnessing it in person for the first time left her in awe. Intent on discerning whether Alexia's success was due to true mastery or mere luck, Edris challenged her further. She asked the princess to imagine the stone levitating and to concentrate on making it float. Alexia obeyed, and with remarkable precision, she caused the stone to hover in midair, leaving Edris utterly astounded. Achieving such control typically took an entire year of dedicated practice. Finally, Edris pushed the test one step further by instructing Alexia to move the stone while keeping it aloft. Despite gathering every ounce of her energy, Alexia faltered and failed in her attempt to shift the stone. She wondered if perhaps she had momentarily lost focus while speaking. Even so, the process had brought her joy, and she eagerly asked Edris if she could try again. After a brief, thoughtful silence, the teacher declined her request. It soon emerged that moments earlier, when Alexia had attempted to move the stone, the table had nearly collapsed, an impending disaster that was narrowly averted when Edris quickly invoked her shock absorption magic. Edris observed that even though Alexia was not yet able to fully control her power, her mana reserves were extraordinarily high. She suspected that if her hypothesis was correct, the princess might indeed be a natural-born prodigy in magic. Time passed, and before Alexia realized it, she had reached the age of 4. Still, the lessons with Edris continued even after that milestone, though Edris's teaching methods grew noticeably stricter and her tone more severe. Even in the midst of lectures, whenever Edris mentioned death, Alexia's face contorted with fear, a reaction that reminded her of the cautionary words Edris once used in the novel when warning her intended prey. The narrative then shifts dramatically as we see Edris entering her private chamber. She methodically set blindness and silence spells around the room's entrance. Yet what happened next was wholly unexpected. Clinging to her pillow, Edris suddenly screamed about how irresistibly cute Alexia was. So much so that the sheer cuteness had overwhelmed her mind. She marveled at how such overwhelming adorableness could captivate someone like the prince. After a moment of frantic exclamation, she managed to regain her composure and calm herself. realizing that since Bon was already infatuated with her, she needed to keep a clear head. Edris reflected that Bon was the kind of man who might overlook even a serious transgression committed by the princess. For that reason, she resolved to become an even stricter person, for exceptional talent at such an early age had the power to consume a person. Flashbacks of Edris's own childhood soon interspersed the narrative. She recalled a time when a boy named Riven had pushed her aside after she had rejected his proposal. Edris narrated that her early life was steeped in hardship. Abandoned by her parents and forced to grow up in an orphanage, she struggled to adapt because of her timidity. After she had turned down Riven's confession of love, he, along with his group, began to bully her relentlessly, a bullying that no one dared oppose, given that Riven was physically larger and stronger than his peers. Even the orphanage teachers, who despised any form of commotion, offered her no support. Over time, however, she developed a hardened indifference to such mistreatment. Then, one day, a magician who recognized her innate magical talent sought her out. That day marked the first time in her life that she felt a glimmer of hope. The man who later turned out to be Wilhelm, the chief magician of the Myral Magic Federation, adopted her and treated her as if she were his own daughter. Yet even as she was captivated by this small ray of hope, nightmares soon resumed. Wilhelm, whom the world revered as an angel, turned out to be nothing more than a madman with two faces, a hideous beast masquerading as human. Gradually, she gave up on all hope. If Wilhelm taught her magic, she learned it. If he ordered her to do something, she complied, accepting herself as nothing more than a living doll. But since no living being could ever be a mere doll, a desire for revenge slowly began to take root in her heart. Not fueled by a seething anger, but rather by a calm, calculated resolve, she decided to live solely for revenge. From that day onward, she dedicated herself even more passionately to practicing magic. By the time she turned 20, she had earned the title of the youngest Grade 1 magician, and 2 years later, she caught wind of rumors that the Empire's princess was seeking a magic teacher. Seeing this as a chance to grow stronger beyond Wilhelm's shadow, she set her sights on the princess. At that time, her interest shifted toward Narval, the god of death, for she believed that wielding divine power might enable her to exact revenge on Wilhelm. She even speculated that a child bearing Narval's mark could prove invaluable in her research. Yet upon meeting the princess, she encountered something entirely new. For the first time, someone showed genuine interest in her. The princess's willingness to share her treasures so freely only deepened Edris's adoration for her. The princess, who continued to live her life as a precious gift, even while knowing that she would die at 21, confided in Edris that she too viewed her existence as a gift, making Edris feel incredibly special. All of these revelations were completely new to her, and she felt compelled to tell the princess that she should not remain indifferent toward death. In that moment, when she admitted that she wished to carry the princess's burden together, Edris realized that she saw her own inner calm reflected in the princess, a sincerity that was not an act but genuine emotion. In another retrospective moment, it became clear that Edris's growing fondness for the princess had driven her to request an audience with the emperor. This meeting occurred on the day when the princess's tender words had moved Edris to tears. After her emotional encounter with the princess, Edris met with the emperor and informed him that Alexia possessed the potential to become an outstanding wizard. However, the emperor was not particularly amused by this claim, remarking that her potential was obvious given her bosun blood. Hearing this, Edris found herself momentarily speechless. She knew that, on the surface, the emperor was notorious for his indifference toward the Soul Princess, primarily because she could not master the Bosan Empire's swordsmanship. Yet this time, his words carried a subtle hint of pride. In response, Edris informed him that some expenses might be incurred during her training, only for the emperor to dismiss her concerns, instructing her to consult Cain about such matters. Still, she could not shake the thought that the emperor had assigned an aide to the princess, which led her to believe that he too secretly adored Alexia, something he had not yet acknowledged. Seizing the moment, she even inquired whether the emperor was interested in learning about the extent of Alexia's magical talent, asserting that in the realm of magic, raw talent was more crucial than anything else. Without it, no matter how hard one tried, it was impossible to advance. As Edris began to explain the importance of magical talent, the emperor reminded her of her own position. After all, this was the empire of swordsmanship, where even modest achievements in martial arts were deemed more significant than magical prowess. She thanked him for his time and prepared to leave, but was unexpectedly halted by Ezra, who asked her whether the princess was truly happy. Edris affirmed that she was indeed happy and doing well, a question that took Edris by surprise, for it was the first time anyone had ever asked if a child was happy rather than simply assessing their talent, survival, or potential to become an exceptional wizard. In her ensuing conversation with the Emperor, Edris confidently refuted the rumors that he harbored any ill will toward the princess, insisting that such claims were entirely unfounded. When she pressed him on why he had not taken measures to silence these persistent rumors, he dismissed the idea as absurd, his resolute demeanor indicating that he simply did not concern himself with gossip. Silently, Edris agreed and, with respectful farewells, left the meeting acknowledging his unyielding indifference to baseless hearsay. A few days later, representatives from various factions converged in the imperial capital to celebrate the upcoming birthday of the emperor. The city teemed with countless visitors drawn by the grand event. Inside the palace, the empress busied herself with adjusting the emperor's cape, advising him that under no circumstances should he show any sign of irritation, regardless of how tiresome the conversations might become. After all, this was a critical diplomatic occasion. "I'm sorry, miss, but I suppose Mr. Chad isn't exactly known for controlling his ruthless aura," she chided, urging him to promise that he would maintain decorum, to which he nodded cutely. In truth, the emperor found the event dreadfully boring and longed instead to be engaged in swordplay. Meanwhile, the ladies at the banquet whispered excitedly about how attractive he was, even fantasizing about preserving his portrait as a treasured family heirloom. Outside, Alexia was in the garden, happily plucking flowers, when her nanny rushed over only to discover that the princess had soiled her clothes. Yet Alexia quickly allayed her nanny's concerns by showing her a radiant flower she had picked from beneath a tree. With a graceful flourish of her magical ability, she made the flower shine even more brilliantly, filling both of them with delight. She then presented the adorable flower to the nanny, evoking an emotional response. Alexia recalled that ever since her reincarnation, the moment she was able to move independently, she had spent her days running everywhere, a stark contrast to her previous life. Now inhabiting her child's body, she could walk and run without the debilitating heart palpitations that had once plagued her, a fact that filled her with pure joy. Yet suddenly, as if from nowhere, the nanny disappeared and a tall, shadowy figure wearing a crow mask appeared before her. Unfazed, Alexia inquired about the man's identity. The masked man revealed that he was considering whether or not to adopt her. In response, Alexia countered that she already had a father, none other than the emperor of the kingdom. The man, clearly skeptical, burst into laughter, insinuating that if she were truly a princess, her isolation here would indicate that she was both unwanted and unprotected. Then, with a chilling tone, he commanded her to accompany him. When Alexia asked whether he intended to kidnap her, he dismissed the notion, assuring her that his aim was merely to train her into becoming a powerful magician, insisting that there was absolutely no reason for her to fear him. After hearing his bland, obvious bait, Alexia remarked simply that he did not seem very smart. Intrigued, the man asked if she knew who he was. Assessing the situation, Alexia observed that his freedom to roam the palace suggested he was an invited envoy, and his formidable magic, capable of making her nanny vanish with a mere gesture, indicated that he specifically sought out children with extraordinary magical talent. Drawing from these observations, she deduced that there could be only one person who fit that description, Wilhelm, who was not only Edris's stepfather, but also a renowned magician in the Mural Magic Federation. The man, however, denied being Wilhelm, thanking her for the confusion. Without warning, Bon arrived to rescue Alexia, launching a surprise attack from behind and thrusting his sword into the masked man's chest. In the ensuing chaos, he rescued the nanny and swiftly took control of the situation. To his astonishment, however, his sword did not injure the masked man at all, revealing instead that he had struck a mere magical projection rather than a genuine body. Undeterred, Bon held the sword to the projection's neck, declaring with a touch of sarcasm that the man would not leave without leaving behind some evidence. "I'll soon locate the real body so we can have a proper conversation," he announced, and then decisively slashed the head off the projection, resolving the immediate crisis. Turning his attention to Alexia, who had remained remarkably calm despite her tender age, Bon asked if she had been frightened during the confrontation with the masked man. Alexia replied confidently that there was no need for fear because she knew her teacher, Bon, would always save her. Moved by her words, Bon became emotional and wrapped his arms around her tightly. Even in that warm moment, she playfully teased him, remarking that he did not have to use such cool, dramatic words while swinging his sword so fiercely. Bon feigned a note of sadness, but Alexia reassured him that regardless of his theatrics, he looked impressive, and she hugged him again. Later, she asked Bon whether the masked man who had attempted to abduct her might be Wilhelm. Bon reassured her that although the man's identity was currently unknown, he would soon uncover it. With that assurance, he summoned the knights to guarantee Alexia's safety and resumed his patrol. The princess then decided to return to her previous activity of playing with flowers, realizing that one advantage of being in a child's body was the ability to quickly forget even frightening events. She gathered more blossoms and fashioned a ring for her father, even though her nanny explained that he was presently busy with a banquet. Determined, Alexia resolved to go to the palace to see her father. Upon arrival, a guard stopped her at the entrance, failing to recognize her as the princess, remarking in a tone reminiscent of asking a principal to show their identity card. Undeterred, Alexia declared firmly that she was indeed the princess of the Bosan Empire. For a moment, the guards appeared confused, and Alexia suspected they might be joking with her. To her astonishment, however, they instead warned her against pretending to be the princess, cautioning that such impersonation could bring severe consequences. Confused by their inability to recognize her, yet understanding that she was not well known, Alexia instructed her nanny to lower her down. Raising her voice, she demanded that the guards state their names and affiliations. Despite her insistence, the guards continued to ignore her. Persistently, Alexia asked whether it was customary in Bosia to disregard the princess's words, mocking them by pointing out that even the knights in charge of palace security at the banquet hall failed to recognize a member of the royal family. She reminded them that if they did not recognize her face, they should follow proper protocol by reporting to their superior to verify her identity, hoping this would finally convince them that she truly was the princess. Meanwhile, inside the banquet hall, the scene shifted to focus on Wilhelm, the celebrated rising star of the Mural Magical Federation. Aware that many eyes were on him, Wilhelm understood that every action would affect his reputation, so he chose his words with great care. Stepping forward, he introduced himself to the Empress and the Emperor, presenting a special item crafted by the founding mage of the Magic Federation, a relic that had been personally infused with mana. To his surprise, the Emperor offered only silence, showing no reaction whatsoever. Noticing the awkward tension, the Empress leaned over and whispered instructions to Ezra, urging him to thank Wilhelm on their behalf. With the Mural Magical Federation and the Bosan Sword Empire standing as the two dominant powers that divided the continent, Wilhelm was well aware that the Emperor's lack of response could be interpreted as a significant diplomatic blunder, one that might invite disgrace between the two mighty entities. Ezra, blessed with exceptional hearing, had overheard the exchange between the princess and the guards and listened intently to the princess's logical arguments, only increasing his respect for her. As the Emperor's focus wandered, the Empress interjected to thank Wilhelm once more for his gift. Suddenly, Ezra rose and commanded the guards to permit the princess's entrance. Realizing their mistake, the guards finally acknowledged that Alexia was indeed the true princess, apologizing profusely for their oversight. Overjoyed on this happy day, Alexia instantly forgave them. Still eager to make amends and avoid any potential fallout, the guards continued to apologize and attempt to charm her with smiles. Alexia then told them playfully that she would overlook the incident if they treated her to some jelly or perhaps ice cream, charming them further with her irresistible elegance and overwhelming cuteness. The guards then escorted her into the banquet hall, where she was joyfully reunited with her parents, the Emperor and the Empress. She informed her father that she had prepared a special gift for him, even as murmurs rippled through the guests at the banquet. Many found it hard to believe that the princess, now so covered in dirt, was indeed royal, given the stark contrast between her appearance and that of the elegant empress. Some speculated aloud that perhaps the rumors were true, that the princess was like a neglected child abandoned by the palace. Hearing these murmurs, the emperor fixed a piercing gaze on the gossipers, silently conveying his displeasure. The emperor then redirected his attention to Alexia, who eagerly presented the charming ring she had crafted from flowers. Wishing to deliver the gift personally, she asked for permission to approach him, but the emperor instructed her to remain where she was, while he stooped to her level to closely inspect the handmade token. "Oh my, Mr. Chad does have a soft spot too," he remarked, gently patting her head and smiling as he noted how messy she had gotten in the process of making it. Alexia felt a rush of happiness from the warm touch of her father's large hands, and aware of her limited time left, she resolved to fully embrace her emotions and express her heartfelt feelings in that very moment. Carefully, she slid the ring onto his finger, her smile growing even brighter as she found comfort in his presence. Deeply moved by the gesture, the emperor assured her with a tender note of emotion that he gratefully accepted her gift. Later that evening, the empress approached Ezra to inform him that his behavior during the banquet had stirred quite a commotion. With a smile, she recounted how the emperor, who had maintained a stern facade throughout the event, had unexpectedly smiled when his daughter entered the room. Ezra disputed her account at first, but the empress persisted, insisting that she had witnessed it firsthand. Moreover, she noted that he had praised the flower ring, calling it the finest gift of the evening, a remark that even disrupted the swordsman's usual composure. This left Ezra pondering whether he, too, might secretly care for the princess. Soon after, CNA notified Ron that because of the emperor's birthday celebrations, important diplomatic matters had been neglected, meaning that in the coming months they would be burdened with numerous tasks and would not have the opportunity to visit the young princess. The emperor's reaction was immediate. He flinched briefly before taking the empress's hand in a tender gesture, kissing it gently before retiring for the night, fully aware that his demanding schedule would soon whisk him away from these intimate moments. A few days later, the emperor paid a visit to Alexia. Upon seeing him, the princess rushed to greet him with the joy of a long-awaited reunion. The emperor affectionately mentioned that they had only met the day before, but Alexia expressed her disappointment, noting how rarely he visited her room. The emperor explained that both he and the empress would be occupied with work for some time, meaning they would not be able to visit her often. Alexia's face fell as she anxiously inquired when they would return. Ezra reassured her that they would come back before her birthday. In her innocent counting on her little fingers, she realized that 8 long months remained until her birthday, an eternity during which she would miss them terribly. Despite this, she declared how much she would miss them, and Ezra, with a gentle smile, teasingly asked if she truly desired to see them that badly. Alexia's reaction was spontaneous and pure. She began jumping and stretching her arms, affirming with all her heart that she would miss them immensely and was eagerly awaiting their return. Witnessing her deep affection, the emperor felt his heart swell. Initially, he opened his arms to embrace her, but then hesitated, instead gently patting her head and assuring her that he would do his best to return quickly, especially for her sake. As he departed, the father's heart was softened by his tender kiss on Alexia's head, a gesture that finally revealed the depth of his love for her. After leaving Alexia, Ron walked toward the carriage with Bon at his side, unable to resist asking what the princess had said to him. The emperor recounted Alexia's heartfelt plea for his swift return, emphasizing how much she would miss him. Bon, feeling a pang of jealousy deep inside, quietly lamented that he had never received such expressions from her. The realization that he was losing in the contest for Alexia's affection weighed heavily on him. Ron, in a casual remark, mentioned that he had never seen Bon in that light, which only wounded Bon's pride further. Frustrated and in need of an outlet for his pent-up anger, Bon resolved to direct his ire elsewhere. Fixating on Wilhelm, the individual suspected of having attempted to abduct the princess in the palace courtyard, Bon decided that once he collected enough evidence to implicate Wilhelm, he would confront him personally, both to achieve justice and to release his own frustrations. 8 months passed, marking the arrival of Alexia's 5th birthday. On that day, she dressed in a stunning red gown that accentuated her charm and grace in her boson body. In a manner reminiscent of a significant growth spurt in our own world, 5 years had passed in what seemed like a blink, making her appear nearly 8 years old by earthly standards. She now expressed herself with remarkable clarity and had grown accustomed to her physical form, despite the inescapable truth that her remaining days were numbered. On the surface, everything seemed relatively joyful, even on her birthday, though there was still no word from her parents, who must be occupied with pressing matters. Her nanny stepped in admirably to celebrate the occasion, striving to fill the void left by her parents' absence, and together they shared moments of genuine happiness. As night descended and the clock neared 11:55 p.m., marking the final moments of Alexia's birthday, she anxiously awaited her parents' return, feeling a mixture of hope and resignation. Finally, the young princess decided to light the candles on her enticing cake. With a graceful wave of her magical ability, Alexia effortlessly ignited every candle on the cake. Closing her eyes and with a heart full of longing, she made a heartfelt wish that her next birthday would be celebrated in the company of her parents. Her nanny gently reminded her to blow out the candles before midnight struck, but Alexia insisted there were still 30 precious seconds left, clinging to the hope that her parents might arrive in time for the cake-cutting ceremony. Miraculously, as if answering her earnest wish, the doors swung open and Alexia's eyes lit up with joy as she saw her father standing there, a timely appearance that filled her with both happiness and relief. Yet her joy turned to worry when she noticed her father was covered in dirt and blood. Suddenly, the Empress entered the room, scolding Ron for failing to clean off the blood and inadvertently frightening Alexia. The Emperor dismissed her concerns with a suggestion that perhaps she might not be fit to be a bosan if she was so easily startled, adding that he had rushed to her birthday because he could not spare the time to clean himself. The Empress then approached Alexia, enveloping her in a warm, apologetic embrace that prompted the princess to return the hug tearfully, grateful for the comfort. Soon after meeting her parents, Alexia drifted off to sleep in her mother's arms. The next morning, Alexia awoke to find her father reading in her room. Calling him Dad, affectionately, she moved toward him, only to be scolded for her informality. Apologizing, he explained that a certain degree of formality was necessary. Undeterred, Alexia leapt out of bed, insisting that expressions of formality could vary. She then asked if she might call him Dad in private, a request he happily granted. As their conversation continued, Alexia proudly declared herself a 5-year-old princess who cherished dignity and grace. Her father gently stroked her head, remarking that she was still just a child who had cried much the previous day. Gazing at him lovingly, she expressed her happiness at having him there and asked if he had stayed in her room all night. He admitted that he had been too tired and had inadvertently fallen asleep. Recalling a passage from a book that described mana within the body as vast as the universe, and knowing that he once fought for 2 weeks without sleep, Alexia wondered aloud what might have caused him to sleep so deeply the night before. Smiling, she expressed a wish that he could be that tired every day so they might spend more time together. Hearing her words, her father realized just how clever she was. Although Alexia soon reconsidered the intensity of her request, she then asked if he could at least be tired on one day each year on her birthday, reminding him that she had only 16 birthdays left before she turned 21. Suddenly, sensing a slight shift in the Emperor's mood, she wondered if she had perhaps complained too much, asking if he was angry because she had requested him to stay for 16 instances. Ron stood up and gently suggested that perhaps Edris should give her another math lesson, emphasizing that 16 was such a small number and certainly not too much to ask. He patted her head in a comforting gesture, then took her small hands in his and told her that everything about her, from merely looking at her to holding her hands, brought him calm and joy. Overwhelmed by these seemingly trivial moments, Alexia began to cry once more. After calming down, she asked her father about her mother. He explained that her mother had needed to leave early that morning for a financial meeting with Duke Ross. Noticing that the Emperor was dressed for travel, Alexia inquired if he too was headed somewhere. The Emperor informed her that they were bound for the Arena Palace because that very day she would move there, and he would escort her personally. The Arena Palace was traditionally the residence for young members of the imperial family once they turned 5, a place where they began their political lives. Although Alexia's primary focus was on reuniting with her brothers, whom she vividly remembered from the selection ceremony, in that moment only the third Prince Riven resided in the palace, while the other princes were away on their respective duties and training. In a historic turn of events, one not seen in 500 years of Bosan history, Alexia, a little girl, was now being escorted by the Emperor himself to the Arena Palace. Upon their arrival, they were greeted by Selena, the palace's chief steward, who remarked warmly that it had been a long time since their last meeting. Selena inquired whether the Emperor had personally escorted the princess, to which Ron responded affirmatively. Displaying natural grace, Alexia bowed and introduced herself to Selena. However, Selena quickly interjected, gently advising her not to bow before a steward, reminding her that as a princess, she need not show such deference. Alexia clarified that her bow was not due to his station, but rather in gratitude for the fact that he had saved her father 10 years ago on the Hill of the Sick. Selena was taken aback that Alexia knew of that incident. Long ago, during a crisis, she had heroically thrown herself into battle to rescue the emperor, slaying 37 enemies and earning the Silver Star Medal, though she had modestly declined the medal ceremony meant to honor her father. That very act was why Alexia had bowed, as a token of the respect Selena rightfully deserved. An exceptional swordswoman in her own right, Selena had commanded one of the strongest brigades, the Black Whale, and after rescuing the emperor, she had sustained severe injuries that eventually led her to become chief steward. Modestly, she downplayed her past heroics, insisting that it had all happened long ago and did not merit such recognition. But Alexia wisely countered that true honor does not diminish with time, and as a princess, she wished to acknowledge and honor Selena's dedication. Struck by the princess's wisdom and regal bearing, Selena realized that the rumors she had once heard about Alexia were indeed unfounded. She noted that Alexia was exceptionally precocious for a 5-year-old, exuding a regal demeanor far beyond her years. After this touching interaction, the emperor informed them that he must depart for a national meeting and entrusted Selena with the care of his daughter. As he left, Selena found herself pondering the unusual behavior of the emperor. It was unlike him to personally escort someone to the palace or refer to Alexia as his daughter, rather than merely a princess. She worried that this unprecedented display of affection might leave him vulnerable. Meanwhile, another charming character made his entrance, the third Prince Riven of Bosun. With dramatic flair, he leaped from the upper floor, proclaiming that his longtime rival had finally arrived. Selena scolded him for his habit of jumping from the upper floor, reminding him that such conduct was beneath the dignity of a prince. Riven retorted, highlighting that Sir Voss had once remarked that as long as one was skilled with a sword, nothing else truly mattered. Sir Voss, Selena's husband and one of the prince's sword instructors, watched the scene unfold. On closer inspection, Alexia observed that Riven did not appear much older than she did. His height was only marginally greater, even though his body seemed more mature for a 9-year-old. She wondered whether his mind was still too childlike to keep pace with his physical growth. Initiating conversation, she remarked warmly that he looked as cute as always. Riven, with curious eyes, asked if she recognized him. Alexia affirmed, recalling their first meeting during the selection ceremony. Riven chuckled in amusement, surprised that she remembered, and then accused her of lying about a particular moment from the ceremony, when he had asked his brother if he was cuter than her. Incredulous, Riven challenged her to prove it, but Alexia confidently turned the tables, insisting that it was Riven who simply did not remember. Taken aback, Riven asked how she knew. Alexia explained that his very expression betrayed a lack of recollection. Changing the subject, she then inquired about his strength, having heard tales of his prowess, and Riven confidently replied that his strength was unmistakable. Alexia then shared a surprising insight, that strong individuals sometimes struggled to recall their past. Reassuring him with a warm smile, she complimented him, calling him both strong and cool. The unexpected praise caused Riven to blush with delight, and he promised to introduce her to a friend next time. Observing this exchange, Selena found it hard to reconcile the typically combative nature of the third prince with the unusually gentle behavior he exhibited around Alexia, and she wondered just what sort of princess could have such an effect on him. A few days after Alexia's arrival at the Arena Palace, although her residence had changed, her daily routine remained largely the same, save for one notable addition. During a teaching session with Sir Voss, the Bosun swordsmanship instructor, a special teacher was introduced. He explained to Alexia a perplexing restriction. As a princess, she was forbidden from learning blow-in swordsmanship, and as a Bosun, she was precluded from studying any other form of swordsmanship. Instead, he suggested they merely play house. Overhearing this, Selena immediately chastised Voss for his frivolous remarks with the princess, firmly reminding him that their focus should remain on the rigorous practice of swordsmanship and not on silly antics. She further reproached him for losing track of time, which had consequently delayed Riven's training session. Alexia watched nervously as Selena delivered this stern lecture to her husband, feeling quite intimidated by the intensity of her anger. Suddenly, Riven burst into the room in his characteristically rushed manner, insisting that he wasn't late due to forgetfulness, but rather because he had been held up by Sir Voss's playful distractions. With a characteristic smirk, he added that he was not late simply because he had intended to be, joking that he was delayed by a little creature perched on his shoulder. Riven then introduced Alexia to this curious animal, resembling a honey badger, and explained that it was the friend he had mentioned earlier. He boasted that this small creature had once fearlessly taken on a lion and emerged victorious. As Alexia looked at the animal, she realized that she had seen it before in a documentary during her previous life, remarking that such a remarkable, honey badger-like being might one day change her life. Who exactly was this mysterious animal? Or, more precisely, what was the nature of this strange creature, and how might it influence Alexia's future? Stay tuned for the next part.